guys, and welcome back to another video. So I kind of wanted a bit of a different change of pace for today, so I wanted to draw and sketch kind of in Clip Studio Paint. So because it is now the last day of 2022, I thought it'd be a good opportunity to actually draw my OCs. And I mean OCs, I'm gonna not include Hansuke in this, so I'm gonna include masaki, sato, koji, and akemi. And it's kind of more or less because I haven't drawn them all that much this year specifically, minus masaki, because masaki I do doodle here and there, and I do a lot of like testing or just like random sketches and stuff if I need to test something out, and I usually opt to draw him a lot of the times if I'm not drawing like something specifically tied towards like a fan art. But I did draw Sato, I think for my last illustration that I posted to Instagram, I think was the last time I drew Sato, so at least I've drawn her once before the year ends. But for today, I thought it'd be fun to draw new outfits for them. So these are not going to be like their official like standard outfit that I would, you know, draw like a reference page for if I wanted to. These are just some fun outfits because I was browsing on Pinterest. So yeah, I just collect a bunch of different like outfits or like jackets, cardigans, sweaters, all that kind of stuff, and I keep them all into like a fashion inspiration board so that I can reference it if I ever need to dress up my OCs, or I want to try out drawing different kinds of outfits or fabrics and stuff for whatever reason I wanted to. So we're going to start off with masaki. And on the right hand side, I did open a new window. I believe in Clip Studio Paint, you just go to Canvas and the next little like drop down menu should be new window. So I just make a new window, pull that tab out so we can kind of have a separate little viewfinder of the full body, just because I tend to warp the body a lot if I get too fixated by zooming in and out, especially like when I work digitally. I feel like when I work more traditionally, I do a lot more full body poses when sketching, but not so much when I do it digitally. And I think it's because you have the ability to zoom in and out too often, which often leads to me skewing the body quite a bit. So, like I said, I'm going to be drawing all 4 of my OCs, but I'm going to be drawing them on separate canvases first, which kind of causes a problem that proportioning and just like size difference is a little bit different for each character. So I believe like Akemi kind of turned out a little bit thinner and his head's a lot smaller compared to like Masaki, Koji, and Sato, and I believe Koji has like the biggest head at the moment, so his proportion looks a little bit funky compared to Sato and Masaki and Akemi together, because for the most part I don't think Koji's that tiny, but if I wanted his head size to be a little bit more correct, I kind of made his body a little bit too small in that case. So for brushes, I decided not to use the right boru pen this time. So usually when I use the right boru pen in Clip Studio Paint, it's usually because I'm trying to preserve the sketch in some kind of way or fashion, and I like to sketch in a way that I do traditionally. So by slowly building up texture or slowly building up value by going over certain areas and hatching. But this time I decided to go with the Froggy pencil, which I will link every brush that I used for today in the description so that you guys can use them. I believe there is no brush that I use that requires clippy points or anything like that, or gold, so you can go ahead and just download these brushes because they're free, and do check out the other brushes that people have made on the asset or material store page thing on Clip Studio Paint, because there's lots of fun brushes you can find on there. So I believe for the line work, which is what I'm doing right now, as you guys know, I don't really do line work all too often. It's still my least favorite step to do. Sometimes I find it a little bit therapeutic, just because I get to play with the lines. You can add as much or little detail as you want. It just makes everything look like super clean, but I just don't really like coloring in line work all that much. We'll see in a little bit when I need to change something that I do paint over it instead of going into my line art to change it and then going into my color layers to change it like individually. But for the pencil, I think I used the Melty brush. I might be saying that incorrectly, but you can check in the description, and that is what I'm using for the line work. And I believe I have the stabilization set to 15. Stabilization, I still think if I want like the best amount of stabilization. I still like paint to the side the most. I think on that one I use S5 or S6 for line work, and then for Clip Studio Paint I kind of hover anywhere between having it around I think 3 to anywhere like a super high number depending on how I'm feeling. But more recently I haven't been using the stabilization too high, so keeping it at 15 still makes it like easy for me to be able to use the brush a little bit more freely rather than relying too much on that slowness from the stabilization. So when I when I wanted to start doing the line work for masaki, I decided to dim down the sketch to about 10%. I also dropped in a light gray background so we didn't have the kind of like that weird grid pattern from when something is like transparent, just because it is a little bit distracting. So I wanted to make sure that the sketch is as light as possible so I can make sure things look correct when I'm doing line work, but also dropping in the gray just helps kind of mute that entire transparency background. After that, we move into the coloring phase. Now, I did do the line work a little bit different, which causes me to color a little bit differently. So for the line work, I usually separate it into skin, eyes, eyebrows, hair, and then everything else onto its separate layer, which usually is just like the clothing. And it makes it a lot easier for me to change the line art color to be whatever I want it to be fairly quickly. But it means I'm juggling about 6 layers for line work, which might be a little bit less for some people, it might be a little bit more for some people. But this time I did everything on one layer, minus Akemi's glasses, but we'll get into that a little bit. But it did make it a little bit harder for me to color in certain areas without it changing everything. So I also usually don't do the details of the eyes in line work. I usually either leave it completely filled in, like black, or I leave it completely empty, so just like the outlines of it. But I never include like the pupil, the highlights, the shading. I decided to do it this time just because I wanted to make sure that things looked a little bit correct. And we'll see if for Koji's he's gonna look a little bit derpy. I don't know if actually I kept it in. For Akemi, Masaki, and Koji, I did do the flipping for the eyes because he is looking forward. But for the most part, I don't really like copying pasting eyes, especially if I'm doing like a straight on pose, just because sometimes it looks a little bit funky, almost because I don't know if it's like uncanny in a way, but it just looks too symmetrical. So like whenever you see me work in Procreate and stuff, or even just sketching in general, usually I sketch both eyes separately. I just like it looking a little bit more natural, even though there are times that sometimes when I color in the eyes, the pupils are not fully aligned, so they look like they're, I don't know, like their pupils are drifting the other way from each other. Oh, this is also the part what I was talking about. So I didn't like how I drew and colored the nose for Masaki, so I decided to paint over it rather than changing the line work and changing the base color or whatever I had for coloring. After I had skin, eyes, and hair done, we move on to clothing and just the rest of the body. So for all of my OCs, I was trying to fiddle around with their color palette a little bit. I think I fiddled the least with Sato's because I think the colors I used are pretty much just the colors she usually wears anyway. Masaki I think has the most drastic change of color palette probably. I think Koji's is a little bit more muted, and then Akemi just like, he wears a lot of black, so it's like it's not too much of a difference I guess. But for adjusting the colors, I made sure to put his turtleneck, his sweater, pants, and shoes all onto different layers so we can play around with the color combination. But I gravitated towards more or less more like a fall look, so a lot of more earthy, muted kind of tones for the colors. So we have a kind of muted, kind of dark green-ish kind of sweater on top of a kind of beige turtleneck for him. And I think like that's like one of my favorite combinations to draw him in usually is kind of like a beige or a light kind of like khaki brown color with either a dark muted green or kind of like a darker brown is kind of like the color range that I usually give him if I'm going towards more of a less saturated color palette, because I think Masaki's sweater usually is quite vibrant, and I usually like gravitate towards brighter colors, but for Masaki's wardrobe I tend to tone it down quite a bit actually more recently. So in terms of coloring, what I did is after when I made sure I got the colors of the outfit that I wanted, I merged all the colored layers, which I think I had 3 or 4, and then I make a new I make a new layer, set it to multiply. I'm using kind of like a grayish purple. Also, I'm going to be kicking into time-lapse for the rest of the video. So there's going to be footage of me with my hand in the camera, and then there's going to be the rest is going to be pretty much just me doing a screen recording so that you guys can see more accurate colors and my hand's not in the way the entire time. But back to the coloring for the clothes. So after I make a multiply layer, I add the shadows with that layer. So I'm using kind of like muted colors for this for the most part. If I need to, I'll alpha lock it and then adjust the colors accordingly, because sometimes purple doesn't read the same on greens versus like on blues or whites. So I will adjust it appropriately. Then I will make another new layer, take the airbrush tool and kind of get some other colors, so let's say a skin color or the sweater color into the green, and I'll pull some of the jeans color into his sweater, some of the skin tone into his jeans, kind of just mixing match before I merge it all, and then we can start to paint. So whenever I do line work, I kind of do a mixture of both my painterly-ish way of like coloring as well as a little bit of cell shading. I think cell shading just looks nice with line work in general. I think it's because I do much thicker line work. If I do thinner line work, I could probably get away with more of a painterly style so that the lines don't stand out too much. But you can see this is kind of the outfit that I ended up with for Masaki, and yeah, I kind of kept this like the coloring fairly simple, not too overly rendered or anything. I think it looks kind of pretty. And here we go for Sato. So I think for Sato and Koji, you'll see full process. Akemi, I kind of missed part of the sketching, and obviously Masaki, I did only portions of snippets so that you guys can see a little bit properly. But hopefully you guys can see how I sketch out the body a little bit, and then me deciding how I wanted to do her outfit. Because I think for the most part, her outfit changes the most. I go from short sleeves to kind of like a scalloped collar to like sharper collar, but then I switched to long sleeve. I was playing around a little bit with her skirt. I was looking at like different clothing on Pinterest. There is a skirt that I really like. Actually, I don't know if you can call it a skirt. I think it's because like even in high school I wore a skort, like skort, which is basically a pair of shorts with kind of a flap of, what is it called? I'm trying to remember what it's called, but it's like the pleats, I guess, over top of your shorts, but the whole fabric also wraps around from behind, so you can kind of like not care about like flashing people or anything like that, because you are technically wearing shorts underneath with a flap of fabric on top, which makes it look like a skirt. But I found one that's like for a long skirt, and it has kind of more bellowy pants. So I found that on Pinterest, and I always wanted to make that kind of an outfit work for Sato, because I feel like she would like more feminine, a little bit more girly, frilly, kind of lighter clothing for her outfits. But I think she's more of a practical person as well, so I feel like she wouldn't want to be restricted to having like a skirt or anything like that. So I would imagine that, not this one particularly, but in the future I will design an outfit based on kind of like bellowy pants that kind of look like a skirt, if that makes sense. Yeah, this one I kind of just did the pleats on top of a long skirt because I didn't really want to do separate folds for each of the legs. I kind of wanted to add a back fabric behind it so that we can connect the two parts together. Yeah, Sato's outfit was kind of easy. I did change her shoes, so usually she would wear like flats, changed them to boots, because I think that always looks quite cute with a long skirt. And her color palette is fairly similar to what she usually wears. So her hair, or I guess like, let me talk about her design a little bit. Masaki and her are cousins, and I kind of wanted to make Sato's color palette similar to Masaki's, but altering it a little bit. So Masaki has more of like browns and teals, so I decided to take Sato kind of like the other two extremes. So I made her hair a lot lighter than Masaki's, and then made it more kind of like peachy toned, and then I made her, usually her outfit's more of a darker teal, more towards like a blue, like anywhere from between a muted teal color to a like a navy, I guess, if that makes sense, is usually her color palette alongside with white. So that's why her color palette didn't really change that much. But I did want some kind of resemblance between Masaki and Sato just a little bit. Even her eye color is just like slightly altered from his eye color. His is green and she kind of has more turquoise eyes. And we're moving on to my youngest and smallest boy. We have Koji, who likes to wear more of like sportswear, anything more like active clothing, which is a little bit hard for me because I was looking up a lot of outfits for like active wear and all that stuff, and it's just a lot of jackets. It's like jackets and hoodies, and I'm like, it's not really any different than what he usually wear. So I kind of made it just a tiny bit preppy by making him wear a dress shirt with the hoodie on top. We have shorts, high knee socks, or I guess high knee. I don't even call these, just higher socks, and then we have some sneakers for him. But yeah, his proportioning is a little bit weird. I have troubles drawing like younger characters, probably because I don't really see too many usually, so I would really need to do some research on how other people draw like kid characters, so we can get Koji to match that a little bit more, because right now he kind of looks like maybe a teen slapped onto a kid's body, so the proportioning looks a little bit funky. Like I said, I did open up Sato's canvas alongside with Koji's from time to time to check the proportioning, but I forgot that Sato's head is a lot smaller. It's just like her hair is very big, so it made her head look a lot bigger, and I accidentally made Koji's head way too large. For his color palette, I kind of made him a little bit more primary colored. So initially his hair was supposed to be more olive toned, but I accidentally kept drawing him more with like yellowy gold hair, or kind of more blonde, and he wears a lot of like navy blue and red, so I guess he kind of looks more primary color-ish, and I think that kind of just fits his overall demeanor since he is a child. But yeah, I decided to just switch it up, add a little bit of black and that gray color that I usually use, which is more of a cool gray, which he has a similar sweater in, but I decided to put him in a jacket with a hoodie over top of a dress shirt, pair of shorts, because I feel like that's what he would usually wear. And yeah, that is Koji. You'll see all the drawings at the very end, by the way. But here's Akemi. So you can see his proportionings are a lot elongated. So I always imagine Akemi to be a lot more lean, slim, and taller compared to Masaki. So Masaki has more of an average build. Initially, I always wanted to draw Masaki a little bit with wider shoulders, but I think I'm going to figure that out a little bit, because I feel like he'd be the type to carry stuff, but I don't want him to be like himbo buff, if that makes sense. He's just a little bit wider shouldered, maybe, compared to like his hips and stuff. And especially compared to like Akemi. So I'm a little bit biased in terms of male clothing, I guess, or more like masculine projecting clothing. I don't know how to describe it fully, but I do like semi-formal or like casual. I don't know how to explain it. I like soft clothing, like sweaters and like turtlenecks, cardigans, anything like that, but I also like semi-formal quite a bit. But I didn't want Akemi and Masaki's taste in clothing or the way they style clothing to be exactly the same. I did the mistake that I gave them both turtlenecks upon their initial design, but I feel like it fits both of them for different reasons. Masaki, because usually he's a little bit, like, he gets cold easily, so I feel like he would wear like chunkier sweaters. I think the turtleneck just fits him quite well. But for Akemi, I love the look of like thinner turtleneck that's kind of like dark with any kind of like lighter jackets or anything like that, for kind of a more semi-formal or semi-casual kind of look. And Akemi is like a design student, so I feel like he'd be nicely well put together. That, or he could be a little bit more eccentric with his clothing. So I decided to go with kind of more proper, a little bit more straight cut clothing that's a little bit more fitted for the most part, and usually with some kind of longer jacket. I've also drawn Masaki with like pea coats and stuff as well, but I feel like I'm going to change his to like more like puffer jacket kind of look, so you can kind of keep him and Akemi a little bit different in terms of like personal stylizing of their outfits. But But yeah, I didn't talk about it too much. So like I said, Koji's more towards like active wear and just anything that allows him to move and breathe. And then Sato is, yeah, a little bit more girly, but also she's, I don't know. I feel like she's still the type to kick ass or something. So we'll get that into the future. Putting Akemi's rimmed glasses on a separate layer so I can add the glass looking texture and effect underneath, or over top the rest of the line work, but underneath his actual rim of his glasses. Let's talk about the new year for a little bit actually before the end of the video. I don't usually do any kind of like New Year's resolution. I actually talked about this with my friend, and we believe that if you really want to change or like start to do something or change your habits, you should just start as soon as you say it, kind of thing, rather than waiting for some kind of special day of the year, unless it is like pertaining to it. But because like I don't see or celebrate really the new year that much, it's literally for me just another day, and it's just like an indication for me to type a different year out. I don't really have like technically new goals per se, in terms of like habits or drawing. Like I already said this last year, I wanted to draw more OC stuff, which I did not do. I didn't do as many studies as I would have liked, but I feel like like the overarching problem is actually time management. So once I get that sorted out, I think I'll have more free time to be able to work on more studies and use those studies to help project me to draw more of my OCs, because each of my OCs kind of fulfills a different niche for each of my things that I wanted to improve on. So masaki for more like foliage and plants, because I have an interest in that in terms of like visual aesthetic and just like a little bit of learning here and there. Koji is because I don't draw a lot of younger characters, nor do I do more action or active poses, so that was the point of Koji. Sato is because I stopped drawing girls, so I wanted to draw someone that's a little bit more feminine and a little bit more flowy. She's also associated with sweets and like pastries and stuff, so it'd be a nice way to introduce either some kind of different setting or drawing like objects. Akemi, I just needed a change in OC, but also because he's more towards design student-ish, it kind of just reflects like my past of being kind of in the studio and stuff, so it'd be nice to use some of my experience to project onto Akemi's character a little bit. I do want to draw a few more new characters here and there. Like I wanted to draw two siblings for Akemi, an older brother and a younger sister, just to be able to draw more characters interacting with one another, and I like the idea of a family dynamic, so I think that'll be fun since Sato, Masaki, and Koji are all only childs. But yeah, if you guys do make some kind of New Year's resolution, feel free to discuss that into the comments. I would like to read some of them because I find some goals very inspiring to hear about and maybe the reason behind it. But for me, it's like I will just take one step at a time going towards what I want to do, because I also would like to pick up language learning, maybe like either Cantonese or Korean. Yeah, so that's for the future. I do have like goals for art that I will not discuss because I want to be able to tackle them slowly and kind of like figure it out on my own before announcing it, I guess. It's definitely like still towards something to do with Hansuke, and I think I talked about this in previous videos, so some people might have an inkling about it. But yeah, here's Akemi, kind of more semi-formal, kind of more put together. I feel like he's the type that likes to layer clothing, and I would usually make him wear patterns, but I decided not to, just a single stripe on each of his sleeves. And I'm just going to arrange them like this so that you guys can see all of them together. And I was trying to fix their proportionings, but I don't think that I was able to do that. I hope you guys have a wonderful new year, and hopefully you guys can fulfill the goals you want to do, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!